Today on Overanalyzing Media, we are going to be analyzing what is called perhaps one of the most deep comedy series ever to be made. It is called The Office. Now, on the surface, for the pedestrian enjoyer of it, they will see The Office as just another situational comedy based on a British original serial. Now, this is categorically incorrect. The Office is perhaps one of the most brilliant shows of all time, and I will unfold it why for you. First of all, The Office contains layered storytelling, which I have demonstrated various times in my Hamwise J Einschwein character. And so today I'll be speaking to all of you just about, theatre and comedy and analyzing the same. So, first of all, you'll probably have a bit of a shock hearing my native accent. Very peculiar accent. It's because when we was brought up, we didn't have much to watch but television. And so The Office holds a special place in my heart because of this. Because you see, it is a metatextual work. It works both as a comedy that you are watching as well as a commentary on media and situation comedy in itself. Now this, I need to jump forward to demonstrate before we look back. I think the most clear and beautiful example of this is within the arc in season 7 when Michael Scott quits the office and he leaves, and a series of more ridiculous bosses are introduced. Now, on the surface, this is just seen as one of the actors was going on to bigger, better things. They were leaving, but now they incorporated the theme of this, both within the show and within the story of the show, as both a subtext and an overt text. And it's very also metatextual. You understand the character, Michael Scott, is trying to bring the new boss in, who is none other than Will Ferrell. And, of course, he is D'Angelo, the angel, almost like the angel of death, you could imagine. And he arrives for the show to take him away. He is leaving. And so, perhaps, he is the angel of death for the show. Now, it's interesting, some of the interactions with him very early on are kind of hinting at that the show has bloated in all these characters that want a second of screen time. And this is apparent in how the show is done. You see all the scenes where they're doing things with D'Angelo arriving. All the cast is kind of gathered around, standing around watching. Now, when you watch the early series, a lot of the characters were just in the background, milling about, doing office work. And it was mainly between the showrunners, which were, of course, Michael Scott and Jim Halpert and the inimitable Dwight and the Pam lady. Now, as the show, of course, progressed, they gave some of the other characters in the background that were just a bit strange, a bit more screen time, a bit more lines, and incorporated them more and more. In so far as that in season 7, a character who was originally just in the warehouse and only brought in as a foil and a gag for the neuroticism of the upper office people is now up in the office, and he's trying on all kinds of outfits to make sure that he impresses the new boss. Now, with the new boss, he says some strange and interesting things, and now when you look at it, there's a lot of symbolism happening with every single thing happening on the screen. So let's look at when he enters the office. They have a new receptionist, a very strange and quirky girl, Eris or Erin or something. And he says to her, "Don't answer the phone with your name." Now, you can look at that in one of two ways. Now, one, it's just a throwaway gag, or it's hinting at something more insidious. It's saying that I've arrived, and we don't need as many background characters with personality because my personality is going to blot you all out. Now it's quite an interesting thing when you think about it. The receptionist at the opening of the show was one of the most important people. It was, of course, Pam Beesly. Now, at this point in the series, you look at the character of Erin, who is a new character, of course. She was not in the original lineup. And all the original lineup, except for Michael Scott, are still in the show. So it's quite interesting. Even characters that had started and then gone away, like BJ Novak. And it's quite interesting. So we're going to go back to that brief interaction. And, of course, Michael Scott's like, no, keep giving her lines. Keep saying your name. You keep on having a name. And, of course, Will Ferrell's character is like, no, don't. And now what's interesting is you can see there's a conflict happening on the set of the show at two levels. One, it is these characters realizing, the actors realizing that their character, if not engaging, interesting enough and dramatic enough, will get cut from the show or let go of for not being interesting enough. Which is why it's so interesting. You look at, but that is maybe not so. You look at characters like Toby Flenderson, perhaps one of the most unlikable characters in the entire show, who, despite his meek demure, the truth of why he is bullied so relentlessly, and this is very, very true, and you can look it up, is that Toby Flenderson is the Scranton Strangler. Now, the thing is, of course, Michael Scott knows this, but Michael Scott cannot prove it. And so what has happened throughout the television program is he's habitually awful to Toby because he knows he's going around town strangling all these people. And that's just what the Scranton Strangler is doing. And so what happens, of course, is since they convict another man for it and they put him to death, and nobody can be convicted twice for a crime that's already been, done over, Toby's allowed to walk free. Now, the problem is that so many people in town, especially Michael Scott, know this, that they are just relentlessly terrible to him. Now, this is all in the subtext of the show. Like, they never overtly say this, and part of the show's humor is that when the camera's on, people act differently than they do when nobody's there. So, for instance, nobody actually working at a paper company behaves like any of the characters in The Office. They're all characters. But as soon as you put a camera on them, all these people, who many of which I think the casting was brilliant, because they all look like people that would work at a paper company. None of these people were overly attractive or, charismatic, with probably the exception, of course, of Michael Scott. And so when you're analyzing this program, you do have to look at all the layers of really tight decision making. It's everything's balanced on a razor's edge, and that's why it works. And so now back to season 7. Why I'm starting at season 7 because it is the most interesting metatextually. Many of the other seasons, they just work on a few different levels. Like there's very symbolic ones, like one about the chairs, which we all can agree is clearly about communism, and that we all need houses. So why shouldn't we all have houses instead of just a few people having fur coats? Now, of course, they mask that behind the chairs symbolism and the photocopier symbolism being some technology for the elites. But everybody needs a chair, just as everybody needs a home. And so that was, of course, one of the things they would do. And you can go through each episode and you can pull out very deep, well thought out themes just like that. And so, back to season 7. I'm sorry, I digress so much. Now, within season 7, in those opening episodes, when they introduce the character of D'Angelo, you have to see not only how strange it gets, but certain characters, like the very unpopular character from Corporate, who's kind of just shoehorned in, he is fighting for dear life to not be cut. And so he's becoming more and more dramatic with the girl Erin, who is much more likable and photogenic and enjoyable in terms of cast members. She has a Michael Scott kind of energy, a very strangeness to her. And I don't watch very much television because mostly, if I'm honest, I just watch The Office over and over. Everything in the sun and earth and moon is represented in The Office. You must understand. It's, in terms of its brilliance and depth, maybe rivaled only by Garfield, I think. But it is brilliant work, and it covers very deep themes, which, of course, we are discussing today. And so in that depth, though, I think a lot of people get lost, and that's why the show works. You can watch it as a complete plebeian without any study of theatre, of metatextuality, of subtext. You can just watch it as a comedy about people working in a office, and it works. It still works. And then you can also watch it as this is a bunch of people who enjoy being observed, and the more you observe them, the more outlandish they become. And the more people that observe them, the bigger the thing they started building everybody wants to be a part of. And before you know it, you have big names, such as, of course, Will Ferrell, suddenly coming in and joining The Office. Right? And I think that's something very interesting because the show ran for 10 years. And so when you look at the symbolism of even that, the textuality of the show, the metatextual context that says, yes, this thing that we built now has become so big that all these big people are coming in. And the problem is, it only works the way that we've been doing it. And other people are trying to do it, and it just doesn't work, and it doesn't. And so, of course, they have a very uproarious interactions with the Will Ferrell's character, and in the end, he gets a brain injury, and then he's taken away, off the cast. And they bring in a new boss every week. And it actually, when they start doing that, it is what we would call a pastiche of the brilliant 1960s television program called The Prisoner, where each week a new number 2 is brought into a secret government facility to torment number 6, and, of course, extract information of why he resigned. But each one fails, and they are taken away. And in the same way, a new boss is sent in, and they interview new bosses to be sent in to take over the role of Michael Scott. But, of course, nobody can, just as nobody breaks number 6, nobody can reign in this rowdy office. Now, the office, back to, of course, the interesting part about when you watch The Office and you really think about it is that it is humor about humor. It's a very, very deep, well-written program. And part of how it is well-written, now you listen to a simple line as, what is it? It's in the opening of one of those cold openings. He's sitting on the roof, and he's looking out on the chair, and he's talking. He's waxing poetical, and you could imagine Alexander sitting up there and waxing in the same way. Looking over the wealth of the world and despairing. Like a lot of the scenes, you can transpose them. In the same way, there's that old story that everything that is happening is not happening now, but actually it's not, 2025 AD, but 25 AD. And the kingdom of heaven is right around the corner in just a few years, in 38. And, of course, all that is being seen and done here is an illusion conjured by a demiurge or demon to confuse you and me and everyone. And me, of course, this whimsical wandering Jew, telling you a story about a story about a story to keep you entertained while The cold sets in. And so the office, the television program, let us go to one of the most interesting characters of all, which is Michael Scott, the man with zero awareness, or all awareness. Because a person who is aware of everything would seem just as aware as a person aware of nothing. Because everything, if you're aware of everything, you have no point of focus, and so you would not be able to, tell any one thing from another. And just as a person who focuses on nothing, they have no point of focus, and so they do not perceive anything at all. And so, in my view, Michael Scott is not unaware. He is simply God in terms of the context of the show. If we're looking at all the characters as different figures of mythology and archetypes taken from Jung's work and archetypical psychodynamic researchers, I would say Michael Scott is God. You think of God as almost a bit of a fool too, because look at all the whimsical, strange things that happen in humanity. You look at the spandrels of our chin, or the doodles on a flower, the golden ratio's spiration. It's all very playful and whimsical, and he does it all in such good sport because he wants to love everyone and have everyone love him. And I think that is another piece that confirms my suspicions that in the symbolism of the show, Michael Scott is God, in fact. He is God come down, and he is working as an office worker who's a bit of buffoon to test humanity, to say, well, how would you treat a man like this? Would you treat a buffoon cruelly, wickedly? Would you torment him, take advantage of him? Take his money and screw him over? Or would you be kind? And so Michael Scott is God come to earth to judge humanity. Now, the rest of the office is a different matter. Now, I have a private and very novel theory that the office is actually about post-colonized Earth, and that all the big cities are overrun with aliens and what have you, and in the context of the show, the aliens are doing a documentary on what do humans act like. And now the problem is, as soon as we see a camera, we act differently. And so it's a documentary about humans made by aliens that have now taken over the world. And the thing is, we live in a paperless society. Why is there a paper company? I think every single character inside the show represents a different mental illness of somebody who lost their mind when the aliens showed up and colonized the Earth. And it's all laid out very plain and clear that each of them has their own little quirks. For instance, with a reading of the show taken from that angle and not the religious, that Michael's God, then Michael is just a simpleton, a simple buffoon who he was made a manager so he wouldn't do anything. He would be managing people by just wandering around and chatting with them and thinking he's doing work, while everybody else is around doing him real work. Because it's a well-known statistic that below a certain IQ point, it's actually more work to get someone to work than it is to not. And so, of course, there's lots of people that are like this, and while they are good-hearted and God loves a fool, it's a question of how do you help that person live. And so that's where management positions were invented. And this is a sacred secret, of course. Just as, of course, every character representing mental illness except for Pam and Jim, who are, of course, the caretakers of this ward. And so everybody in there it's actually a dementia ward of sorts for people that couldn't hack the reality of what had happened after the aliens came. And so you look at, let's say, Dwight, who's very clearly a man with autism, And then you look at Stanley. He's very withdrawn, perhaps a catatonic schizophrenic with maybe a bit of distemper, focused always on his numbers and sudokus and puzzles. you know, and finding patterns within patterns, very easy to irritate. And then you look at, of course, Kevin, the buffoon, the other one, but the real buffoon. Now, if Michael, of course, is a boob, then, I mean, Kevin is the king of boobs. And while he started as a regular sort of character, through Flanderization, he became more and more outlandish and stupid throughout the show until he was tripping over himself. And now it's very interesting in the episode, season 7, where D'Angelo arrives. All the characters are given a gift by Michael that is often both commentary and cutting and a roast all at the same time. And so Kevin Malone is given a poster of himself as a pig man, like myself, salivating over a pizza slice like a boob. And so he says, "You're not this, Kevin. You do not need to be this." And he is almost giving his, "Hey, I'm leaving the show. Please don't let your character devolve into this." But of course, the audience wants more Kevin spilling chili. If that's got lots of ratings and clippings and sharing on social media, that is what they will get. And so that is the subtext of the show. The dark, deepest layer is that all of them are actually in a psych ward. And of course, Toby Flenderson is the strangler. And so he's in there because he went mad and started strangling people. He's a psychopath. You have to be to work in HR. To smile at somebody one day and then stab them in the back and send them down the river next. And so that's another fact of management. Most people working in management positions, they're actually part of a government program just so that they can have some bread on their table. And yes, people are like, oh, well, they get a lot of money for that. It's like, yes, but a lot of times, I mean, it's actually the family putting in a lot of the wages they're getting. And so we only tell people that things cost a certain amount and they make a certain amount of money. The janitor, for instance, in that show makes more money than anybody else in the show because he is actually needed and actually does his job. Everybody else there horses about inside their make-believe selling paper to clients, and all they're doing is testing these people to see, like, okay, there's no such thing as selling paper anymore. We live in a paperless society. So why is there a paper company? Let's see how long it takes these apes to catch on. And so that's one of the readings of the show, of course. And there's many readings. Like I said, there's another one that's very religious and Gnostic, where, Michael Scott is God, and Dwight is perhaps the deceiver, and Jim is every man, and Pam is every woman, and all the other characters represent one of the 7 deadly sins and virtues. For instance, when we do that reading of the show, we look at Angela. Now, it's interesting because there's Angelo, and then there's Angela. Now, that told me as soon as he did that and walked on the stage, I knew he would not last. Because it's like having Sauron and Saruman, right? And so when you look at Angela, she is both judgmental and wrathful and sleazy at times, but also she's a prude and proper, but only when it comes to someone that is not her. And so it's a very interesting character of almost, her morals are cracked right down the middle. What other movie or show has a character so complex, who wags her finger and goes to church in one hand and then scuttles off to an illicit affair with her boyfriend with another, and then still works in the same office with both? What kind of woman would do that? Well, I do not know. But anywho, let us look at other characters. Now, Oscar is a very interesting character because he is also one of the few sane men in the series. He is very well spoken. He's thoughtful. He is a homosexual, but one must note that he is not ever portrayed as campily gay. He does not behave as a stereotype. He behaves as a competent, well-liked, and professional member of an office. And so that is why Oscar is an anomaly when you look at, some readings of the show, because it's like, well, all these other characters are portrayed as, such fools and boobs and immature, and Oscar seems like the only one who wants to get down and get to work. And what's also interesting is he takes a break from the show for a little bit, and then he comes back with the when Michael kisses him, right? And so these are all very interesting themes to unpack and to address and to visit. Like, name another show that has a character like that, like Oscar, who does not wear it around on his sleeve, constantly behaving in a stereotypical fashion, but is instead a good, concise, and again, well-liked member of the cast from what I view the show. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Now, let's just move on to one of the characters is Phyllis. Now, Phyllis, interesting, like each of the gifts that Michael gives in that season 7 episode, one of them is a chattering pair of teeth. Now, the gift to her, of course, is that, and that's what she is. She's a bit of a busybody, a bit of a gossip. And now the thing is, the gift is both a warning and a reminder. This is what you've become. And so if you don't watch out, you're going to become just a chattering pair of old teeth. And now the thing is also, she's elderly compared to many of the other cast members. She's quite old. Now, when you think about the teeth also being a representation of losing your teeth, of old age, of dentures, and what have you, the gift is also a reminder that death is approaching, Phyllis. Death is approaching you, Phyllis, and you do not even know that death is approaching you. And so you must take care. Take care, Phyllis. And so that is one of the things we must look at when we analyze The Office. Is you must look down to the very deepest layers. Even the slightest thing askew is symbolic within that show. That is how much attention to detail there was. Now, for instance, I think the greatest example of this is during season 7, after the introduction of Delangelo, you also see the introduction of a character whose last name is Garfield. Her first name has escaped me right now, but that is very interesting. And so I think what they're referring to is the immortal humor of Garfield, and bringing in someone with their names as if to conjure that humor out of the darkness. And so that is why I think when we are analyzing The Office, we need to look very deeply and ask ourselves, what is The Office asking about us? Garfield, of course, a comic that had run for ages and still is running today, and, God willing, will run until the end of time, perhaps generated automatically by AIs, by searching every single Garfield comic ever made and constructing new ones in infinite combinations. You could have there's just a refresh button. You hit it and get more Garfield and more Garfield and more Garfield. And in the same way, I wonder, could AI ever evolve to a place that we could do that with The Office? What kind of wondrous dream would that be? Infinite episodes of The Office, each one randomly generated by this machine, pulling themes and weaving the story together in ways that are Byzantine to us. One can only hope. Now, some of you are probably saying this is ridiculous. How could a simple comedy about people working in a paper company have any of this symbolism? And I say, look at it twice and you'll see what I see. Any of these readings are valid, and you can go down a very deep rabbit hole, and I am not ashamed to say I have. I think perhaps the most interesting reading is that we are in a paperless society, and yet there's a paper company. It's sort of like you have foxhounds, but no foxes to hunt. So what does that say about us keeping the foxes around? Are we keeping them as pets? Are we keeping them as little animals to lark about and look good? Or are we keeping them alive simply to skin them for fur coats? To harken back to that early episode. Now, when we look at The Office, Andy Bernard stands to be a very interesting character as well. Now, notice in the episode that we have been discussing, he is given the gift of the new clients, the best clients as the new boss comes in, too much to the chagrin of many of the other people. Now, this, I think, is both a commendation by Michael Scott and a challenge. Now, he is a wise man, I have no doubt. And when he gives these to Andy Bernard, everybody's mad, but it is also saying that I'm leaving, and I had all the best jokes. He did. He really did. And this shows in how the show, of course, devolves once he is gone. And yes, they try to bring him back, but we'll not get into that today. Today, we're just talking about Season 7. It's a turning point. Now, with Season 7, you must understand the most important part of Season 7 is Andy Bernard. Now, I know that strikes you as odd because he is not a likable character. He's annoying, and he's made to be annoying. And this is even referenced within the show. When the new boss comes in, he says, "You're the funny man, make me laugh." And he, at first, does a little bit of humor, and he gets a laugh. And then he gets a bit of humor, and it doesn't make him laugh. And so he's like, do something funnier. And then eventually there's a big slapstick routine where he's sticking his hand in a toaster and pouring coffee on himself and drinking soap and doing all kinds of zany things to make the boss laugh. Now, I can see the symbolism in that as clear as day, and I hope you can too, because it does not bear explaining. Another piece is, you can think of, The Replacement, of course. Now, Will Ferrell is a very big name in comedy, and he and Mr. Michael Scott were also in other films, such as Anchorman, and where the Michael Scott character is playing a much, much smaller role than Will Ferrell, of course, who was the showrunner. And now in this instance, after 7 years of running and being in the side, and now suddenly having his own, suddenly the showrunner from a previous film is his extra and replacement, gone within 2 days. Brilliant. You see, it's a very cutting jab, not only at the structure of sitcoms, the mechanics that we have them run on, the Flanderization, etc., but it's also a jab at the industry itself, a vicious slash across the cheek, a mock saying, "How dare you? You cast me aside, you made me your boob, and now it is you who is the boob," And so that is why I believe all the characters that are trying to get introduced in the following episodes is really a look, we built something amazing, and now suddenly everybody wants to eat at our table. Which is the only way to do things. Never expect to get invited to the gallery. Don't play to the gallery. Never do that. Never play to the lowest common denominator. Never try to get invited to their parties. Make your own parties. Get bigger and bigger and build up with people that are reliable and good. And then one day, I'm sure one day people will be analyzing this show in the same way that people are analyzing The Office today. Great, long doctorate theses written about the brilliance of The Office. And will that be done with this show? Who knows? I can hope that it is not, because, you see, as a psychoanalyst pig detective that solves time travel mysteries, I have included lots of symbolism that's just there to throw you off and lead you down the wrong garden path. And if you're dumb enough to eat up that rat poison that I've left on the trap, well, then you deserve the snap. Anywho, back to the show about The Office. I digress about my own. When really, I doubt anybody can surpass The Office in terms of fame. Even Seinfeld, which I think Seinfeld still holds up in some areas. However, the distance of time makes it more and more antiquated. You remember the episode where they're all trying to find where each other are because nobody has a cell phone. It's like watching one of those early Irish dramas. Everybody's, they're sick or they're drunk or they're poor, and they're all trying to, get potatoes and catch the rabbit and, all that stuff. It reminds me of that. And so when we look at The Office, one day it'll seem just as antiquated. They'll be like, well, they had computers that you sat at. They didn't just do their calculations in their head. They had to go into work. Everybody works from home. I guess that wouldn't work for a comedy. Just a bunch of people working from home and showing their suburban lives and how their suburban lives are getting constantly interrupted by their work life and vice versa. Actually, that would be actually pretty good. They should make The Home Office. Scratch that. Maybe I should make The Home Office. Oh, that'd be quite a funny show, wouldn't it? But anyways, let's go back to The Office. We are spending enough time daydreaming. Now, I realize many of you will be confused by this diversion of programming, but the truth of the Hamwise J Einschwein show is that it's always been intended as an advertisement. It's a simple fact. Everything you watch is just an ad for another thing. And there's very little real art out there. And unfortunately, this show, despite maybe any of its merit, is only made possible by our generous sponsor, 9413 Incorporated. So please buy their products and send them money to the link in the description. And now back to The Office. Yes, so with The Office, I think the most important thing that you can do is to watch it, but really watch it. Really pay attention as you watch it. Not just have it in the background, but like if you pause it every time somebody says something and really think about what they're saying with that line. Like every time that Jim turns and says, "Hey, Pam," he's saying, "I love you." And I think that when you really slow down the show and you think of it like that, suddenly a lot of the show becomes a lot different, a lot deeper. You think about that. There's this woman that he's desperately in love with, and she cares and knows nothing of him until later, of course. And then she does, and then she's conflicted. And then she loses this very long-term relationship to be with Jim. And then she makes a family with him. And so, if we're looking at, how do you judge then that? Do you judge the affair badly or good, or what is that? It made a new life, a new happy, I forget the child's name, but whatever. So you have to look at it as, it's also about being beyond judgment, because a lot of these people, they have to work around each other and be around each other. And of course, some of them have very abrasive personalities. For instance, the BJ Novak boy. Now, he is better known as the intern, and he is never named throughout the show. But something that's very interesting about that intern character is just how interesting that one of the producers ends up shoved in the closet of the show. And that's very literally, too. Like, they put his office inside of a closet. And I think it's almost like you're paying for this, but we don't actually need you. We don't actually want you on set. You're not good. And of course, the embezzlement plotline was written in to scare him as a producer. So this is a well-known fact about the show. Okay, we're at 40 minutes. So, thanks for tuning into the first Office analysis. That was weird, right? We got hours of this. Because apparently, that's what you do. You just overanalyze The Office. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and like and subscribed, and send me money, because I'm on the make. Hi-yo, waka waka waka. I'm here all night, folks. Tip your waitress, try the borscht. But seriously, today's was just meant to be a very short, very fun, because I haven't posted for a while, because I've just been having to take care of some stuff. So hopefully everybody's doing okay out there, staying safe, staying sane. And remember, don't take anything I say seriously, or you might be on my most wanted lists. Most wanted for being a dummy. Ohio, waka waka waka. Oinkity oink oink, oink oink. So that's the show. I hope you enjoyed it, because I enjoy making them, even if nobody watches them. Doesn't really bother me too much. But that's that. So, as always, learn sign language. They can't hear hands. And make sure to buy the other products from 9413 Incorporated, such as the uproarious webcomic that I was featured in called Bunny Hug, and buy the books. My book, My Brother Has Brain Parasites, and Now So Do You, because it's a very funny time travel adventure with lots of laughs, and my character makes a cameo appearance as part of the 9413 Incorporated family. Thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe. Comment down below. I love all your feedback here on YouTube. Reading each comment gives me so much joy. This is like a 4-minute long goodbye, because I realized I have to go to 4 minutes and 42 minutes and 44. So I got like a minute and 44 seconds left. I don't think I'll say anything notable there, but I guess I could say my Mussolini joke. Okay, so Mussolini and two jerks walk into a bar, and the first jerk says, "Hey, give me a whiskey with 1 ice cube, you stupid bartender." And the second jerk walks up to the bar and says, "Hey, stupid bartender, make that 2 whiskeys and 2 ice cubes." And then the bartender turns to Mussolini and he says, let me guess, 3 ice cubes and 3 whiskeys. And Mussolini says, no. No. Shoot. I screwed it up. The bartender says, nuts. Well, anyways, the punchline goes, 9 milky bitches. And is that going to get me demonetized? This was funnier in German. So there's a translator's note that 9 is no, and milk is milch, and bitter. Okay, so I just mispronounced that. Well, that's all right. You get the point. It's funny. Hey, this was funnier in German. That's probably a phrase that hasn't been said too many times.